Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
The Milwaukee Brewers are a fantastic story, but sorry, they're not winning the World Series. A review of the new Cowboys documentary, and Shedeur Sanders is not a victim. It's right ahead on a new edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome in, off and running on episode number 36 of Gordon Damer on Sports. We got lots to get into on this edition, plenty to discuss. But before we do, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. It really does help out. If it's Apple, if it's Spotify, if it's YouTube, whatever. Just hit a few buttons. I really do appreciate it. All right, so what we're going to start out with today is something I think that everyone can agree on, which is very difficult to do in this day and age in sports or in anything. Find something everyone can agree on. And it is the story of the baseball season so far are the Milwaukee Brewers. Right now, the Brewers have the best record in the entire sport. They just finished off that 14-game winning streak not that long ago, which really is kind of unheard of in today's game. They're on pace to win 100 games, which might not sound like a lot, but in an era where this season especially, there's more parity, there's more balance, winning 100 games, they're the only team that is on pace to win 100 games. And it's not just that they're winning. It's the way that they're winning. The Brewers play a style and a brand of baseball that's really refreshing. It's pleasing to the eye, right? They don't strike out much. They put the ball in play. They steal bases. They take the extra bag. They play excellent defense. And in an era where it feels like so many teams are of the three true outcomes, home run, strikeout, walk, the Brewers, they're doing the opposite. And they play with action. And as a fan, as a viewer of baseball, it is a breath of fresh air. This is how you want the game to be played. But maybe the best part about the Brewers this year is their story themselves. They're a franchise who has never won a World Series. They've only been to one World Series, and that was back in 1982. And this season, it's happening in the shadow of the passing of a franchise icon in Bob Uecker, who was the beloved voice of the Brewers for decades and decades and was probably more recognizable with the Brewers than any of the players on the Brewers. So this feels like a Hollywood script, right? You have the underdog team, the small market club who's struggled for years and years, and the loyal fans who have waited for some form of success, and the franchise legend who's watching from above. Everything about this Brewer story screams storybook. But I'm here to tell you the hard truth. And the hard truth is the Milwaukee Brewers are not winning the World Series. How can I say that so confidently? Well, it really comes down to one very simple thing. They don't hit enough home runs. Now, I know what you're probably saying. Gordon, you just told us that that's the thing that makes them unique, right? Makes them refreshing. It's the fun part of them that they do all these other things. And that is true. It's what makes them special in the regular season. Unfortunately, October baseball is a completely different sport. And there is no greater misconception with baseball fans than the idea that you can't win a World Series if you rely on home runs. That's not just wrong. That's backwards. It's actually the exact opposite. Winning in October is about the home run. And history backs it up. Just take a look at the last 5 World Series winners. The 2024 Dodgers, they finished the season 3rd in home runs in all of baseball. The year before that, you have the Texas Rangers. They also finished 3rd in home runs. The year before that, the Houston Astros won the World Series. They finished 4th. In 2021, the Braves, they finished 3rd. And the 2020 Dodgers, which was a weird year, I'll grant you, they finished 1st overall. So that is 5 for 5. The last 5 World Series title winners have all finished top 4 in home runs. So that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. That is the reality of postseason baseball. Now, some fans will say, okay, But what about strikeouts? You can't strike out and win in October. You need to have productive outs. And that sounds good, right? That feels right. But when you actually look at the numbers, the data doesn't hold up. Yeah, the Astros in the year they won, they finished second in baseball with fewest strikeouts. But the Rangers, the very next season, were right in the middle of the pack. They were 15th. The Braves, before that, they finished 22nd. So the data tells you it's kind of all over the map. There's no consistent correlation between avoiding strikeouts and winning the World Series. What there is a consistent correlation with is home runs. Home runs in the regular season, which get you to October, but especially in October. In October, in the playoffs, hitting is harder. Pitching is elite. Every at-bat feels like a battle. And when you manage to get a hit, that hit has to matter, right? It has to be impactful. It has to be meaningful. And obviously, there's no more meaningful hit in baseball than the home run. More than 50% of the runs scored last year in the playoffs, 50.5%, were scored via the home run. During the regular season, it was around 43, 44%. So that tells you all you need to know. In the postseason, half of all the runs scored come via one swing of the bat. And think back, just to last year's playoffs, the most memorable moments, what are they? They're home runs. Freddie Freeman's grand slam for the Dodgers in Game 1 of the World Series. Pete Alonso's bomb against the Brewers. Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton, Shohei Ohtani against the Padres. These were the plays that defined October. Why? Well, it's very simple. Stringing together 3 and 4 hits against elite pitching is almost impossible. We just talked about how offense is harder come October. But catching one mistake and then driving it out of the park, it's also hard, but that's more doable. And the stats bear that out. In the postseason, the team that hits more home runs wins the series 80% of the time. Think about that, 80% of the time. That's better than Sex Panther, which only works 60% of the time. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, you're going to try and find the outlier, right? The 2015 Royals. They didn't hit a lot of home runs. They won the World Series. Isn't that proof that you can win with small ball and doing all the other things? No, it's only proof that they were the exception. The Royals were the outlier. Since 2015, since that Royals team, no team that's finished in the bottom half of home runs in baseball has won the World Series. Not one. And as of right now, the Brewers are 18th in home runs. That puts them in the bottom half. Now, to be fair, they're not alone. The Astros right now, this year, 15th, middle of the pack. Padres are even worse at 29th. Only the Pirates have hit fewer home runs this year than San Diego. So Milwaukee's not the only contender with a power problem, but the numbers are the numbers. Again, since 2015, you have to hit home runs, and it's only getting more pronounced. Now, the Brewers' strengths are great, and they do a lot of things well. They do most things well. They are the best team in baseball in batting average with runners in scoring position. That's nice. They're an excellent base running team. Few teams are better. They consistently take the extra base. They don't give up outs on the base pass. They're one of the top defensive teams in the league. Their team ERA, I think, is ranking 3rd or 4th. They're top 5 in sacrifice hits and contact rate. And that's a great formula for the regular season. But in October, it changes. It's a completely different game, and you need the long ball because you can't, again, string together hits against elite pitching staffs. Not consistently. Not enough to win playoff series when you got to win 4 games out of 7. What's more likely, stringing together 3 and 4 hits against ace pitchers or catching that one pitch where you can do damage? Again, think back to last year's playoffs. History tells you it is the second one. So why home runs matter more than ever before is despite baseball's efforts to inject more contact and more stolen bases, the opposite has actually happened. Offense overall is down, and in the playoffs, home runs are up. The only one that makes home runs more important, not less important. So can the Brewers win the World Series? Well, look, I said no. I don't think that they will. Technically, they could because baseball's postseason is completely unpredictable. And because of the short sample size, randomness plays a role. So Milwaukee does have some guys who hit home runs, right? Christian Yelich has 26 this year. Andrew Vaughn has been a slugging fool since he came over in that trade. So they're not devoid of power. But for the Brewers to win it all this year, it would require them to completely play a different style of baseball than they've played all year. They would have to morph into a team that they're not really built to be. And when you've been successful playing the other way, I think that that's incredibly unlikely. And look, this is not what I want to be true. I wish this was not true. As a kid, I actually loved that 82 Brewers team. Paul Molitor and Robin Yount and Ben Ogilvy with the awesome shaking of the bat, Gorman Thomas and Cecil Cooper and Ted Simmons. That team was phenomenal. They'll always hold a special place in my heart, especially because I remember getting a Brewers hat and thinking how cool the logo was. And it was probably like 5 years later when I realized, oh, wait a second, the logo's not actually a glove. It's an M and a B with the ball. Oh, look at that. So if my Yankees lose out, which let's be honest, not the topic for today, but looks like that's going to happen before the World Series, I will be pulling for Milwaukee for however long they are in it. I'd love to see it happen. But I'd also tell Brewer fans, don't get your hopes up. Now, I know what you also might be thinking as well. The Yankee, right? If home runs are so important, Gordon, then why haven't the Yankees won a World Series since 2009? And that is a fair question, right? The Yankees do hit home runs, so why haven't they had success in the playoffs? Well, here's the thing. Home runs are essential. But they're not the only thing. You need to do more than just hit home runs. You have to be able to play defense. You have to be able to run the bases correctly. You have to have pitching. You have to have a manager who knows when to pull the right strings and maybe not bring Nestor Cortez into I digress. The Yankees hit plenty of home runs, but they fail in those other areas. But the reverse is also true. If you don't hit home runs, history has shown you that you don't really have a chance. The Brewers, that's their problem. They do all the other things right, and maybe they'll be the outlier, but generally the home runs, that is a non-negotiable come October. So the Brewers, a great story. They're one of the best stories, if not the best story in baseball this year. They're fun, they're likable, they're new, right? You haven't seen them every year, year in and year out. But unfortunately, October is a different game, and no matter what anybody tells you, October is about power. It's about the home run. And unless Milwaukee finds a way to completely change who they are and outslug the best of the National League and then in the World Series, they're not going to have the Hollywood ending that a lot of us are hoping they do. All right, I got a recommendation for you if you are a football fan, if you're a sports fan in general, or really, even if you're not a big sports fan, I got a documentary you're absolutely going to love. You need to, if you haven't heard about it already, there's a new Netflix documentary on Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. And I can say, I'm not fully through it yet, but it is absolutely fantastic. It's 8 episodes long. It's got all the production value that you would want, and it tells the story of Jerry buying the Cowboys in those early days and the problems that they had when he took over, and the hiring of Jimmy Johnson, and it has all the access that you would want. You hear from Jerry. He's got great stories. Jimmy Johnson, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, all the players, Dion, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Charles Haley. There's too many names of all the important people, Roger Goodell. They're all there. And if you follow the NFL at all, you'll be blown away by the amount of voices and the stories. The stories are just so awesome, and the footage is just so incredible. And you know, the best part is, it's not just a recap of the stuff you already know and you've seen 1,000 times before, and the highlights and the calls and all that type of stuff. There are aspects of the story that I'd either forgotten or maybe never knew about in the first place. The access, the storyline, it's compelling, it's entertaining. And the best thing you can say about it is you plop on the couch and you decide to watch one episode and you end up watching 3 or 4. So it starts with Jerry buying the team. And in the beginning of the story, where the documentary really shines, go back to 1989 and the early story of Jerry Jones and how he became successful and then buys the Cowboys and fires Tom Landry and fires Tex Schramm. And if you weren't around at that time, Tom Landry was not just the coach of the Cowboys. He was an icon. He was a coaching Hall of Famer. And Tex Schramm was the architect of the guy who had built the Cowboys into America's team. So Jerry walks in, this outsider, this oil man from Arkansas, and completely cleans out. Now, in this day and age, I don't think it would have been that big of a deal, but back then, the reaction was obviously brutal. And he's called every name in the book, bozo and idiot and clown. And you know, in that moment, All those labels would have been 100% true, except for one thing. Jerry Jones just so happened to be friends with Jimmy Johnson. And that friendship is the hinge moment. That's the butterfly effect of Cowboys history. Because if Jerry hadn't known Jimmy, if he didn't have that connection to one of, if not the top college coach in the country from their days in Arkansas, then we know what the Cowboys would have become. And all those labels about Jerry Jones would have been 100% correct, because we've seen it play out for the last 30 years. Without Jimmy Johnson and his direction, the Cowboys would have been just everything Jerry Jones. Flashy, overhyped, a disappointment, not a championship level team. And I think the documentary does a great job of showing that in real time in those early episodes about building the 90s dynasty. And what you notice is, especially early on, Jerry's not really he's got some stories here and there, but the drama really focuses on the players and especially Jimmy Johnson in turning things around from the disaster early on into the juggernaut. And the one thing that the documentary I don't think really hit on as much and should have, the key reason why the Cowboys were so successful was, and why Jimmy Johnson's the guy, he had just come from the college game. He had recruited all these guys at Miami. He knew all these guys. He knew their strengths. He knew their weaknesses. So this was not just a guy coming into an organization and scouting players available. He knew them for years. And before Jimmy Johnson, college coaches were not really successful in the NFL. That transition didn't really happen. Jimmy became the first coach to win a national championship and a Super Bowl. So he was the outlier, and I think he kind of changed the perception. And he did it because, yes, he had a system and he was a great coach, but he had the knowledge. He had the knowledge entering the league of the guys who are going to be available. And that's how the Cowboys built what they built. They built it through the draft, like every real NFL super team does. The Herschel Walker deal, taking those picks and turning them into gold. If you didn't have Jimmy Johnson there and his knowledge, that doesn't happen. So Jerry can say whatever he wants, and I think this dispute is largely decided. I don't think anybody's really disputing it anymore, unless you're on Jerry Jones's payroll. Jimmy Johnson is the architect of the Cowboys dynasty. And what the story does is, as you see, as his role, Jerry's role, he gets more and more footage in the documentary, the success starts to wane more and more. You see his fingerprints start to spread, his need for attention, his desire for credit, the lawsuit against the NFL. And look, Jerry's not dumb. He's an incredible businessman. He saw really where the NFL was going, and he pushed the NFL to where it is now with the sponsorship stuff and the TV dominance and all the opportunities to make more and more money. The NFL would not be today what it is without Jerry Jones. But when it comes to the actual building of the Cowboys dynasty, that debate is settled, dude. That's long gone. And one of the funniest parts of the documentary is when Barry Switzer comes on, right? So Jimmy and Jerry split, go their separate ways. He hires Barry Switzer, who had been out of football altogether. And Jimmy leaves, Barry steps in, and they win a Super Bowl in 2 years. And you see the players talking about Barry Switzer, and they love Barry Switzer. He's a very lovable character, and I think he got a really good edit on this documentary that I didn't know a lot about Barry Switzer. But they're talking about, well, not anybody could have done what he did. It was difficult to do what he did. But, of course, Jerry Jones is in the documentary, and why the split happened with Jimmy Johnson. He said 500 coaches could have coached the Cowboys roster to a Super Bowl, and why he was fine firing, basically, Jimmy Johnson. The other aspect of it that doesn't really get into, but I took away from it, and I wonder if other sports fans feel the same way. The Cowboys' success, I feel like they're the original model for tanking. Tanking existed before the Cowboys, and not that the Cowboys intentionally lost games, but the way their turnaround played out and how it happened so quickly, it feels like for sports fans, tanking became an acceptable strategy, right? To go from 1-15, you trade away your best player, and within 3 years, you're in the Super Bowl. That turnaround happened so fast that I think it changed in a way for fans how acceptable tanking became. You bottom out 1 year, you have respectability, and then the Super Bowl. That's the dream. And honestly, the parts that are in play back then, still 30 years now, you can still pull it off. Yes, free agency and trades are a bigger part of it, but the NFL still remains the easiest league to tank in. There is no lottery. If you're bad, you get a top pick. If you're the worst, you get the number 1 pick. And because quarterback is the most valuable position in sports. That one pick, if you hit that pick, it changes everything. And when you nail that number one pick or a high pick and get that quarterback, any position, you basically control that player's prime, right? Rookie contracts, 5 years. You got the franchise tag after that. As a team, you have control. So I know people will say, well, professional athletes, they never tank. They're playing for jobs. They're playing for contracts. There's a pride aspect. They could get injured. That's true. But front offices, they can absolutely set up a team to fail. Because again, quarterback is the most important position. And if you don't have that, you don't have anything. I mean, look at the Saints this year. I think they have some talent on their roster, but they're rolling into the season with a terrible quarterback situation. And as we sit here in August, chances are they're going to be picking in the top 5. And it would not be a surprise if they're picking number 1. And I think that reality, you can trace that back to the 80s and 90s Cowboys. So if you lean into the rebuild, I don't think that fans are as down as they would have been at one time. So I can't rave about the documentary enough. It also, I think I brought this up before, it's a perfect example of sports karma for Jerry Jones, who, despite all his brilliance, he sabotaged his own organization because he was worried about who got the credit for Super Bowl wins. And now, 30 years later, he's never going to win another Super Bowl as owner of the Cowboys. And I'll say this, if you're a Cowboys fan or you're not a Cowboys fan, this documentary will make you hate that organization. If the hate has waned in any way, this documentary will make you hate that organization all over again. The arrogance, the success that they had. So, but the debate, we had the debate for a while about Belichick or Brady. The debate about Jimmy or Jerry, that one is about as one-sided as you can get. And if you check out the Netflix documentary, because of the advantage of time, you can see who is the person who is responsible. So Jerry is still trying to put it out there that he's this brilliant GM. There's not another team in the sport who would hire Jerry Jones at this point or at any point, knowing what they know now, for Jerry Jones to be their GM. And even though he's the guy who made the split, he's still profiting as a result of this documentary, which focuses all on the Jimmy Johnson years, that he is still profiting from the success of when he first walked in the door. And what you also see about this documentary with Jerry is that being the center of attention, he even says it, being the soap opera of the NFL, that is his number one goal. That's number one. Making money is a close second. And whatever is third is a very distant third. And the last 30 years show that winning is not the priority with the Dallas Cowboys under Jerry Jones. All right, let's finally hit on the Shedeur Sanders story from this past weekend in the preseason. Final preseason game for the Browns, because I think it's going to be one of the last times we bring up the name Shedeur Sanders anytime soon. At least I hope so. And I would like to pull a line from the TV show The Office and Michael Scott that feels perfect for this situation. And the line is, how do you tell someone you love, I told you so? Because that's where I'm with the Cleveland Browns and Shedeur Sanders. I think it was back in episode 2 or 3 of the podcast. I said, Shedeur Sanders is probably already screwed. His NFL career is probably already done. And because what we watched in that preseason game this weekend and the discourse that has followed it since, it's the exact nightmare I think anybody who has been talking about this story has been focused on. You could not draw up a worse example of why Shedeur Sanders is not an NFL quarterback than what we just saw. And yet people still rushing to make excuses for him. Somehow it's not his fault, it's the Browns' fault. And I have to be honest, the Shedeur Sanders discourse, the Shedeur Sanders truthers are exhausting. So let's lay out the facts. This past weekend, third quarterback in, and it was one of the worst performances any quarterback has ever had in the preseason. Now, I don't remember preseason, but Warren Sharp of Sharp Football does. He's had 9 years of preseason data, play-by-play data in the preseason. And in all that time, no quarterback had ever taken 5 or more sacks and fewer than 11 dropbacks. I think he had 5 sacks and 11 dropbacks. So that's not just bad. That's historically bad. And he was the third quarterback in. So he's not going up against Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett. This is happening against third and fourth stringers, guys who are going to be selling insurance in a week or two. And he could not process quickly enough to beat them with either his arm or his legs. And the thing about it is, the Browns' offensive line, I'm sure it's not good, but you watch the tape. The line is not the problem. He is holding on to the ball, trying to play hero ball. He is slow to process the play, and he is unable to pull the trigger. All the stuff that scouts have been talking about leading up to the draft. He's not a dynamic athlete, so he's not going to be able to run away from plays, especially not in the NFL. And the processing, the lack of it is shocking. And it's not an unfair criticism. He has a history of taking bad sacks and taking a 2-yard loss, which would have been in certain situations, and turning it into 10, 11, 12-yard losses and killing drives. And when he had that preseason debut, one game in the preseason, people, see, he's this, he's that, he's a superstar. One game in the preseason. Have we never witnessed preseason football before? We're getting worked up over one game of the preseason. But now when he's having problems, it's not Shedeur's fault. It's the Browns' fault. I got news for you. The Browns didn't make him hold on to the ball. Everyone's screaming, get rid of the ball. I'm sure the Browns were also screaming it. That's not on them. That's on him. And I'll tell you what really gets me here. People criticizing the Browns. The Browns are the team that drafted him. They're the only one that wanted him. And I don't even know that they necessarily wanted him. I think the owner pushed him to it. But every other single competent front office looked at Shedeur Sanders and said, no thanks. So he lasted to the 5th round for a reason. And this is part of the reason. Now, I think the other part was a bigger part of it, the off-the-field stuff, the Dion stuff. But the Browns are the team that actually gave him the chance. And they're the only team that did. And now, because it's the Browns, we're going to twist ourselves into knots saying, well, it's the Browns' fault that he's looking like a deer in the headlights. No, it's not. They're not a great organization. But part of why he lasted to the 5th round is him. And let's be honest about the Browns. Are they a great organization? No. They are the definition of dysfunction, and they have a track record of quarterback misses time and time again. Mismanaging talent, not being able to develop guys, also picking the wrong guy. And I think that is an indication. That's a better indication that Shedeur's not an NFL quarterback, is that he was picked by the Cleveland Browns. Those two separate things can coexist. One, Browns don't know what they're doing. Two, Shedeur Sanders showed every bad tendency in an 11-snap skill set that he's not capable of being an NFL quarterback. Those two things don't cancel each other out. But yet the excuses just keep coming for people. Well, the Browns are sabotaging him. Joe Flacco looked fine in that game, the same game. Dylan Gabriel looked sharp. Well, he was the 2nd quarterback. Shedeur is the 3rd quarterback. Look at the tape. Dylan Gabriel steps up when he feels the pressure. Got rid of the ball quickly. Didn't make catastrophic mistakes. Shedeur Sanders did the opposite of that. If you were judging guys of who belongs where on the depth chart, that game was a perfect example of why Shedeur is where he is. And no one was expecting him to be Patrick Mahomes. Just don't simply have a historically awful preseason performance in your final preseason performance. And again, not to gloss over, this was the knock on him. He takes bad sacks. He doesn't get rid of the ball. He wants to play hero ball, and he's not a dynamic athlete enough to be able to overcome those flaws with his legs. So this is not just a one-off. This was not, the worst of Shedeur Sanders, clearly, but it's not just that. It's why so many teams looked at him and said, we're out. Because you can teach mechanics to a point and footwork to a point, but decision-making, the processing speed, that seems like one of those things that you either have or you don't. And if Shedeur Sanders was looking to make a statement in that game by playing hero ball, it was that he don't have it. But the only reason, of course, we're having this conversation, and I think another reason why so many teams avoided Shedeur Sanders, because if this was Shedeur Johnson, if this was Shedeur Jones, we're not having this conversation. It's because it's Dion's son and all the hype that happens and all the cameras that are following him around. But people actually thinking and convincing themselves that he was going to be a franchise savior. Where is Mel Kiper Jr.? Where is he? Because he was one of the ones screaming, all these teams are wrong. Power of the crowd, man. Power of the crowd. The crowd generally gets it right. And I get it. The Browns have a history of being a disaster. They're the team that took Johnny Manziel, and they're the team that made the deal for Deshaun Watson, and they got all these quarterbacks and all this type of stuff. They are living in quarterback hell. Forget about purgatory. They're in hell. But Shedeur Sanders is just another chapter in that book. Let's not confuse. Yes, the Browns are incompetent, but that doesn't make Shedeur Sanders better. And that is on the record that the Browns are incompetent. So he has to overcome that. And so anybody who's going to defend Shedeur, you can't leave out that part of the equation. The Browns are a disaster, but yet the Browns are the only team that wanted Shedeur. Might be a trend there. And go look at the quarterbacks around the league. Young quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud gets rid of the ball quickly. Brock Purdy doesn't have the most impressive skills. He's not a dynamic athlete, but makes fast decisions. That's the model. You have to be quick, decisive, and efficient. Holding the ball, looking for the miracle play like Shedeur Sanders was doing, not the way it's going to work. You're on the wrong side. So where this the takeaway here is what it should have been all along. Shedeur Sanders is not a victim of this. He's not being sabotaged by the NFL. This storyline, I don't know where people are getting it from. He's not being sabotaged by the Browns. He's not some misunderstood gem who's going to prove all these people wrong. He's a rookie who was taken in the 5th round. If he's going to be anything in the NFL, chances are it's going to be a work in progress. And for the people who have hyped him up and convinced themselves that somehow he was going to walk in day one and be the Browns starting quarterback, they're the ones who I think have to kind of go back and reevaluate things because they've ignored the signs. They've ignored all the different things that have been said about Shedeur Sanders. And not that one awful preseason performance is enough to show it, but it's a confirmation of all the things that we've talked about before. So you can blame the Browns, or you can blame the staff, or you can blame Kevin Stefanski. And I'm not a Stefanski fan. I'm not a Browns fan. The fact that they weren't willing to make it work with Baker Mayfield tells you who they are. But that doesn't all of a sudden absolve Deion Sanders or Shedeur Sanders, because that was the same situation when he was successful the first preseason game. Everybody was, oh, look how great he is. He's a 5th-round pick with obviously glaring flaws that I don't know if they're fixable. And maybe he is with an organization that might not be able to fix him. I will grant you that. But they were the only team that is willing to give him a chance, and based on what he's done so far, I don't see another one. So the odds are not 0 that he could ever be successful. But after seeing what you've seen, the total package of college and preseason, the odds aren't 0, but they're pretty astronomical.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button wherever it is on the screen, on your phone, whatever you do. And we will check you out again later this week with a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.